Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. Thanks for being with us. Today our topic, how real estate decisions impact your business. We're talking about ways that you can use real estate to increase your top line numbers and your bottom line numbers and make better real estate decisions for your business. And now we're going to talk about controlling costs, which is always very important to a business, to understand and control costs. Before we go there, I'm going to follow up on a few flexibility issues that I didn't get to in the last segment. Now keep in mind, as you're negotiating leases, a lot of the power that you have or don't have to negotiate favorable terms is going to be dependent on the strength of your lease and your credit, the size tenant you are, how much the building landlord needs you in the space, how much they want you in the space. So keep in mind that before you start this process, you ought to think about all the various things that could help your business down the road and immediately, and organize those, prioritize those, and think about with the market and the sector and the space that you're in, how much negotiating power are you going to have so you can really concentrate on the things that are most important to your business. And back to flexibility, one of the things that can help with flexibility is to have a cancellation right. So maybe that to get as much tenant improvement dollars, contribution from the landlord to build out the space to fit your needs as you could, you went with an initial term on your lease of say 10 years. Well, maybe like the flexibility of buying out that lease in 5 years so that if something changes in your business, you have that right. Depending on the size of your lease, I mean, it might be $1 million or $100,000, or maybe it's a small space and it's $20,000. But if you can negotiate those things, think about the impact on your lease, right? Because what a landlord, a lender, investment broker has to look at, a landlord rep, is that if you have the right to cancel your lease, then the initial term is that term. And so it will impact the value and the kind of deal you get. But depending on your business and what you think could happen down the road, it can be important to try to negotiate a cancellation right. Landlords hate it. Another flexible situation is to have a flexible design, right? As you know, everyone that's in commercial real estate or running a business knows that office space design has really been changing, and flexibility is really key. So when you're designing the space, when you're picking out furniture, when you're looking at everything involved with your new space, think about flexibility. For example, you might want to have one room that can be used for 2 or 3 different purposes. Maybe at some points, it's in the summer, it's handling interns that are coming in doing work. Maybe it's for training at other times. Maybe it's dividing into 2 rooms at other times. So try to create as much flexibility in your space as you can. And with your furniture, think about that when you're doing it. All right, let's move on to controlling costs, because that's what's important to everybody, it seems, is understanding ways to control costs. And again, it's going to depend on the strength of your credit and your company in the marketplace to see what kind of controls you're going to get. We're going to just touch on a few ideas for you to consider. First of all, when you think about controlling costs, don't go overboard, right? I mean, if you just concentrate on cost, you may lose the big picture, right? As we opened the show, we talked about the importance of how your brand and how your company can be looked at related to your space and the building and your location, how it can impact recruiting and retention and morale and efficiency. So when you're looking at costs for real estate, take all that into account, because it may be that you want to be in that Class A space because it's going to help your business and it's going to offset the additional costs. Now, when you get to setting that budget, one thing to consider is rent-to-revenue ratios, meaning that if you look at your industry and the people that you do compete with, your tenant rep can tell you kind of a range that the rent-to-revenue ratios of people in your industry are paying, so that you know what that is. So when you're setting a budget, you can at least consider it. Now, you've got to adjust it for the market area and the market that you're in, but it can be a good guidepost, if you will, because think about this: if your competitor, you have a lot more cost there than your competitor. Maybe they can undercut you on a bid, or maybe they can outpay you when recruiting someone. So think about asking your tenant rep for rent-to-revenue ratios in your industry. Another thing is, when you're comparing space, be careful. Some tenants we see will just concentrate more on the rent per square foot, and that's just part of the cost. You really need to look at the overall occupancy costs of each location, right? You might be comparing a gross lease to a net lease or a modified gross lease. You might be looking at different size spaces. You might be looking at different incentives from different landlords, different build out incentives that they're contributing to your build out. So the best thing to do is look at the overall cost of occupancy, including insurance, including utilities, including the actual move. Look at all the things that will determine occupancy costs, not just rent per square foot. And then you can bring that down to a net present value. Tenant reps like us around the country can help you with that process. So at least you're comparing the math on an apples to apples basis. Now, another thing to controlling cost is to look at CAM cost and controlling them. CAM, common area maintenance. It's been around for a long time in retail leases, where you pay a base rent and then you pay a common area maintenance, or CAM cost, on top of that. Office rents have really gone that way as well, where a lot of office buildings are asking you to pay a base rent and then a CAM that's separate. Or at least there's going to be expense stops and things in your lease, so you need to understand common area costs and how they're divided. So one of the ideas is to cap the amount that those can increase each year. So if you can, maybe you're trying to cap all the CAM cost, and maybe you're trying to cap it at 2% or 3% or whatever it is for your marketplace and the power of your negotiation that you have. Make sure that it's non-cumulative and not cumulative. That can be one word change in your LOI and in your lease. There can be a big difference down the road in cost. So giving you an example, if it's cumulative, you might be able to say, hey, the rental increase, the increases in CAM were 1% this year, they're 1% next year, and they were able to raise them 3% a year. Well, they only raised them 2% in 2 years. So now in that third year, they can really raise the cost. And you might think, you know what, I don't think my landlord would do that, that sort of thing. Well, look, the market can change, the ownership can change, and they can come in and look at their rights. So don't think that when you're a tenant and you're running a business and you're negotiating that lease, that you may have the best landlord in the world and the best relationship. There's a possibility he is not your landlord down the road. So you need to protect your business with a long-term aspect in mind, and trying to include provisions that control costs in CAM can be very helpful. Now, there's other ways to try to exclude things that might be in CAM. Maybe they're capital expenditures, maybe they're leasing commissions, maybe they're legal. There's lots of things that you might be able to try to exclude out of CAM that the landlord can pass along to you. And if they won't put a cap on some of the expenses that they can control, maybe they will cap the expenses that they can control. So think about controllable expenses and non-controllable, and look really closely at that. Work well with your tenant rep and your lawyer to try to get protection on those increasing costs. Well, stay with us. We'll have more on how real estate decisions impact your business. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. Hey there, thanks for checking out the Commercial Real Estate Show. Don't miss a video of special interest to you. Be sure to subscribe below. And if you appreciate the videos, be sure and thank our sponsors. There's a link to more information about them in the description. For more videos, podcasts, and articles, check out creshow.com.